Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and I'm going to be talking about The Haunting of Hill House, Season 1, Episode 3. It is called Touch. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. And this was a Theo episode, and kind of as I was expecting after the last one, each one would be focused on one of the kids. What I think is interesting is that we seem to be going down in the age order. We started with, because the first episode was a bit more mixed, but it was definitely focused more towards Stephen, who's the oldest. And then we went to Shirley, and then we're on Theo. And I believe the last two are twins, just based on the title of the next episode. But I could be wrong. But we'll find out. We'll find out when we get there. So yeah, so we focus on Theo, and Theo's got again, we get a sort of how she ended up kind of on the path to the career she's chosen, which we didn't even know before. Now we do. We know that she's a child therapist, and I think it's an interesting, given their traumatic childhood with what happened with her mother in the house, which, you know, from their point of view, depending on which one it is and what they believe, might have been some sort of weird suicide or some sort of weird thing involving their father. But given what they went through, her going down this path is definitely an interesting character beat. What I thought was really fascinating, though, was kind of her perspective, beyond the actual touching thing, which we'll get to in a second. But, there's a scene in this episode where it's after the first confrontation about the book with Shirley, where he is now offering the siblings a cut of the royalties because it's partly their story. And Shirley's not very happy. And calls it blood money, and we kind of find out by the end that for sure Theo has actually taken the royalties, and it looks like Shirley's husband's also taken them, and that's why he had that solo checking account, was because of that. Because in this episode we see that Theo warns him that she found out and said, hey, you better make up a story, and he says, yeah, it's your ass as well as mine. So it seems like they've both taken royalties, and she is not going to be happy if she finds out. So that seems to be that somewhat solved, as far as I can tell. But in that scene, what I thought was interesting was the way Theo spoke about their childhood. She said that she's heard Luke in Nellie's ghost stories, right? And she's also heard the two older kids be skeptical. And she mentions that she's a middle child, but she's also kind of the middle in terms of where she stands on this, because she doesn't outright say she doesn't really believe the ghost stories, although she has a sort of condescending tone almost. But she also implies that she doesn't agree with the skepticism of the two older siblings either. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. So, and we get evidence in this episode as to why she would have maybe more of an open mind, because she has this extra thing going for her. And that is because when they first introduced the gloves and she said she was a germaphobe, I actually kind of thought, okay, I think that's a lie. I don't know what it's for. I don't know why she's wearing them, but that felt like just like the obvious lie to say to get the person to stop asking. And throughout this episode, in the flashbacks especially, we get a sense that she is I'm not quite sure what the exact term here would be for this. I don't want to just say psychic. I feel like it's a bit more specific than that. It was making me think of almost one of the powers that Bruce Willis has in Unbreakable, where when he touches someone, he gets a sense of, if they've done something bad. It's kind of like that, but good or bad, and also extends to objects. It extends to, like, she can touch like an object and she'll get like the history of that object. She'll get a feeling for it, and so that's interesting in and of itself. And we kind of get this opening scene where she thinks her sister Nellie's crawled into bed with her, and she's holding the hand, and then realizes there's no one there, and then says, and then thinks to herself, whose hand was I holding? Which, I mean, if I'm going to critique that scene, I think it was just a bit forced that she actually said that line out loud at the end of the scene. She's like, whose hand was I holding? Yeah, we know you're thinking that. Of course you're thinking that. What else would you be thinking at this point? But we get these various other scenes in the house where she knows, she's helping her dad throw out junk that's in the house, and she's like, no, wait, this is actually valuable, I think. And he opens it, and there's like a really expensive bottle of wine in there, and she's like, well, how did you know that? And then later on, there's this great little almost subplot where Luke wants to go down the dumbwaiter. He wants to take a ride, and he gets chastised from Mrs. Dudley about it. And this is another scene where we see her powers in action, where because Mrs. Dudley has her hand on her shoulder, Theo basically says, no, she's not angry, she's scared. Like, she's terrified of what might happen if you go poking around, kind of thing. And Mrs. Dill looks even more terrified. The girl could sense that she knew, she could tell she was scared, and that concerns her greatly. But basically, middle of the night, looks in the dumbwaiter, and Theo reluctantly agrees to send them down. Well, they're going to send them up, but he actually goes down. It goes downstairs to a basement. And this is, in terms of horror scenes, this is probably the most effective scene in the episode. I thought was when he's down in this basement. And what's really effective here is he's got a flashlight, and it's kind of, it's pitch black except the flashlight, and it really uses the light well here, and it kind of starts to flicker, and he's kind of like hitting it to get it come back on, and it's just like the briefest glimpse you see of. I actually thought it was like an animal leg at first, the way it kind of came out. Later on we see it's actually an arm. It's this the smelling man, which we're kind of introduced to in this episode. We see this arm come out. And then eventually the full almost zombified looking dude starts crawling towards him. But I thought this was a really effective horror scene because of the way that it played with just catching a glimpse of the arm and just getting a sense that something is there, and then the time it starts to ramp up, and Theo starts to scream, and then the parents intervene and kind of pull him back up. So really effective little spooky scene. But the parents don't believe that he was in a basement or that he saw anything, because there's no plans for a basement, and Theo intentionally touches him. This is like the first time I believe she is using her powers intentionally. She's touching his hand to try and get a read on him, and she's like, I believe you, and she knows he's telling the truth. So she goes hunting for this basement and discovers, sure enough, a basement. It's hidden from the plans because it was a bootlegger operation back during Prohibition, and her mother's like, hey, how did you find that? It's kind of like how you knew the wine was in that bottle, kind of like how you knew that door was there that led to this secret basement. Just kind of like how when you went down to that basement, you found this book, this ledger, and you used, because she says this is a secret book that they didn't want to be found, and she's like, oh, it's interesting you knew that. And when she touches her mother, she sees her mother's face with like half of her head. It's almost like she's been hit with a shotgun, and the side of her face is just bloody and like blown out, and that scares the shit out of her, of course. But what's interesting about this is that it leads to a scene later on with the mother, with Olivia, where she's not surprised that her daughter's got these abilities. She talks about her grandmother, and she just puts it as her grandmother was sensitive, and she wondered if her daughters would become sensitive as well, and her migraines kind of relate to that. She says that, Shirley's talking in her sleep. Sometimes the things she says, sometimes it's silly things that make no sense, just normal dreams, random stuff. But sometimes it seems like it might mean something. And she mentions that even Nellie, when they first moved into the house and she asked her what she thought of it, Nellie responded with, it's very loud, which is a very bizarre word. It almost sounds like she's talking about, oh, there's too many ghosts. Like I can hear it's just too busy. There's too much going on. So, but a very peculiar word. And this is more of the concrete thing where Shirley, instead of debating this, basically just says nothing, kind of almost admitting that this is kind of what's really happening, and this is where she gives her the gloves and says, oh, this is this is the gloves. This is why she wears the gloves. It's because if she touches someone, she gets a really sort of deep personal connection to them, where she can sort of sense their history and how they feel in their past and any bad things they've done. And I imagine that's very overwhelming when you're not expecting it or predicting it. So she wears gloves most of the time. And it also stands to reason to me why she is so standoffish with partners, where she just wants one night stands. She doesn't want to get close to someone, because I imagine when she does have sex, when she does get intimate with someone, it's probably far more potent for her than most people, because she is this almost an empath. It seems to be more than just an empath. She sort of senses like details and like facts and stuff, but that seems to be a big part of it, is the empathy. And I imagine that's such a strong thing. Like she's so scared of like being close to someone, and then, I imagine the fear of like betrayal. Like imagine she gets close to someone, she's in love with someone, and this bond's like special and important. She feels she's connected to them on this deep level that most people never feel. And then that person, say, cheats on her, and she thinks everything's going fine until she touches her partner, and then she gets a sense of it. Like imagine the fear of that and the heartbreak of that. I wonder if that plays into why she's so standoffish, beyond just traditional commitment issues and traditional, because earlier on, actually, when she's with the first kid, the main kid, I'll say, the girl, she says, oh, when I was a kid I was scared as well, because the girl describes the smelling man, which is very similar to what she saw as a kid when it was related to her brother. But she brings up that when she was a kid she'd get very scared, and she's like, oh, I know these aren't real, so I used to like imagine a wall. I'd lay a wall brick by brick, and I'd make the wall so thick that nothing could get in. And it almost feels like a self-reflective statement where she doesn't realize she's describing how she is emotionally with people. Like she's walled herself off because she's so scared of anyone making a connection to her. So I thought that was a neat touch. I think it's also neat because I was actually thinking about this. It was especially when I didn't notice it with the first kid, although I went back and checked because I was curious. But she doesn't wear her gloves when she's working with the children. Because I was wondering actually when it got to the second kid, and it made a real emphasis on her shaking the kid's hand, like she was intentionally doing it. It was like she uses her powers to try and help because she can understand the kids better. And I think a lot of this makes sense. That what she went through as a kid means she wants to help kids. We see it in the flashback. She wants to help a little brother. She wants to help a little sister. And then on top of that, the fact that she can connect to them in a way where, because it's sometimes hard for a kid. I mean, it's hard for anyone really to sometimes really say what they feel, but it's especially hard for a kid to be honest about that stuff, especially when they're talking about demons and ghosts and all that kind of thing. And so I was thinking, does she use that power? Does she use it to actually help her do her job and help children? And it seems to, that is the case. She intentionally does that, to the point where she goes to the house of the girl and asks to go into the basement. And she feels the sofa down there, and it's a scene where she's sort of like drifting her hands over the banister and various objects. She's almost looking for the psychic link to try and like deduce what's going on. And she lies down on the couch and she gets so terrified that she has to like hold her hand over her mouth to stop herself from screaming because she feels what happened in this room, the fear, the horror of what happened in here. And we don't get to see what it is. We just have to imagine, what is she seeing? And I think that's one of the most effective things here. Is sure, there's a couple of times where we see, in fact, notably, whenever we've seen it, it's when she's a kid. When she touches her mother, we see what she sees with her mother, with her head blown off. Later on with her dad, towards the end of the episode, we see what she sees there. But as an adult, we never actually get to see what she's seeing. We just have to see her reaction, see how she responds to it, and then let our imagination do the work. And that's actually really effective. I thought it was effective in this scene. It's like, my God, what horrible thing is she seeing? And it turns out she's seeing the child be molested by the foster father, whom she intentionally, again, shakes his hand. She's got her gloves off and she goes to shake his hand before she leaves. It's almost just to confirm it. Like, I think she got the horror of what was happening down there, and then she just wanted to be sure it was him, so she shook his hand. She wanted to be sure. And, when she's on the phone, let's say, send the authorities, send social services, send the police, she's like, hey, have I ever been wrong before? She's used her powers to deduce this kind of thing before. And this makes sense to me why she would be at least open to the possibility that some things exist, even though I don't think she believes it yet. I think right now she is more leaning towards the idea that her father did something awful, that she does not trust her father. Because when she touches him in this kill, it's the final night, and I liked how it came up saying the caption was, "Oh, Hill House, the final night." Like the final night's going to be a big deal, and what happened that night. When he's racing them all out, and he's got the younger kids, and he's like, "Hey, take them to the car." When she touches them, she sees like a glimpse of a bunch of different things, and one of them looks like him like pushing Olivia against the wall. One's this creepy face, and then there's another one as well, and it's almost like she's kind of torn between the idea that something actually happens, supernatural, in a way, or was it her father was abusive? Did he do something bad? Is he the monster? And I think that's part, again, that belief in part is what's motivating her to help kids. It's why she wants to do her job. And again, much like the past episodes, there was a lot of really neat intercutting. A lot of neat transitions. There was some simple stuff with her like going to eat the apple, and then it would cut to her as a kid eating an apple. I thought it was neat how the first time she ever used her powers intentionally, when she touches Luke to see if he's lying, I'm pretty sure. Actually, no, it's not that scene. It's before that. It's when Luke and Nellie are playing with the phone. I don't even know what you call that. The indoor, like, it's like a phone pipe, right? Where you just speak in either end. I'm sure there's a specific term for that. Someone will tell me in the comments. But and she touches the bed in the room, and she sort of like brings her hand up. We don't get to see what she saw here. We just see her fear. But she's looking at her hand as she's leaving the scene, and she's like, I think I've got a superpower. It's basically her moment of realization to an extent, between that and a couple of other examples so far. And it cuts to her with a second child, the little boy, that scene starts with a close-up of her hand saying, hey, my friends call me Theo, shake my hand, kind of thing. And it was a really neat transition. It was like that's the moment she realised she was sensing something through touch, and then it cut to present day, her using that in a scene. It was a very neat link through the scenes where you understand exactly what she's doing in the scene because of what we just saw. And of course, there's some stuff in this episode that intercuts with the previous episode. There's the when she turns on the light because she wakes up screaming. We saw the other side of that last episode. And we see her find out about Nellie, and she's sitting in there. And I thought it was interesting that she gives all of the things that Shirley told her kids last episode was advice she took from Theo, which makes sense because not only is it her sister that she might get advice from, she's also a child therapist, so it makes sense she would ask her for advice on this. But everything she told her is what she kind of said last episode, and also, she brings up, again, just sort of getting into the trauma of what they went through. She brings up, I don't want to explain to them myself that I'm mad at Auntie Nellie because of what she did, because she should know better than anyone what this does to a family because of what they went through with her mother. And I think that's, I think that, again, is reinforcing the trauma of what they went through, and how for most of them they have grown up seeing it as a suicide where their father might have. I don't actually think they think it's a homicide. Like, I think they believe that the mother committed suicide, but I think for Theo, she believes that abuse led to it, or she believes that their father didn't do anything to help her, or at least something in that range. I'm definitely getting a sense of that from her character, and I think what's neat about these episodes focusing on each character individually is we're getting a good sense of who they are, their motivations, and how they operate. And again, a lot of neat cuts between the transitions, and of course it's after a lot of this where she goes to the morgue and she goes to touch her sister. She wants to know what happened to her sister, and she goes to touch Nellie, and she touches her on the head, and she gets so terrified by what she sees that she backs up into the other side of the room, into the table, and is on the floor just crying. And I actually thought the episode was going to end here. I thought this was a good end of episode moment. I thought it was going to fade to black and credits were going to come up, because it was a really neat touch. No pun intended. But I thought that was very effective. Much like the couch scene, I thought this was a very effective thing. Oh God, what did she see? What did she feel? What emotions did she feel from her sister that she felt before she died? I mean, really, really interesting. And tantalizing, plot details. It's like, oh, okay, right, we're building the fear and the tension. Of course, there's the risk that this may not live up to, when we finally see what happened, which I'm sure we will, there's a risk it may not live up to it, but in terms of building suspense, this is doing a really good job of building the mystery and a bit of the terror that comes along with it. Something really bad happened. Whatever was motivating her to go into the house, whatever did what it did, was it really I don't necessarily think it was a suicide. I don't think their mother was a suicide either. I feel like, or at least if it was suicide heavily inspired by the spirits within, inspired by the ghosts. But yeah, so really, yeah, that was a strong episode. That's maybe my favorite of the three so far. I think it did a really good job with Theo's character. A really good job with building the mystery of what's happening, and I thought the way it didn't show us what she was seeing when she was reacting so strongly. It was kind of like that scene in the first episode where the wife was telling the story about her husband that'd seen the ghost, and how effective that was because of how descriptive she was being. This was kind of like that, but instead of being descriptive, it was more mysterious, of course, because we didn't get any details, but it was just her reaction. What is she reacting to? I mean, obviously we find out what the couch thing was quite directly, but what is she reacting to when she touches Nellie? Only she knows. And she obviously drinks. Then she calls the lady friend from the previous episode, who tries to hey, okay, I'm glad you called, and I'm here, and yeah, we'll probably have sex, but can we talk like human beings? Can I find out a little about you? How was your day? And she opens up and tells exactly what her day was about, catching a child molester. And she's like, okay, I get that you just need right now. You need comfort and release. You don't need the talking. You want to forget about your day, which is why you called me. And that kind of initiates the scene, which leads us to the flashback of the final night, which leads us to the final moment being her saying "touch me," which again cuts from her saying "don't touch me" to her father, from before. So no, really good episode. I thought it set up her character very well. It made her probably the most interesting character so far. But I am now very intrigued if Shirley will eventually realise that what she's saying in her dreams might be relevant, might be important. Is there more stuff with Nellie's powers that we're going to find out about? Do the guys have powers? I don't know. We'll find out. But no, I was really into this one. I thought, again, the through line between all the scenes. There was a scene where she was dancing, of course, to the music videos and stuff, and the training videos, and it cuts to her dancing in the club, and then she takes a drink of water, and it cuts back to her drinking water as a kid. Really effective through line, because the episodes jump around a lot, and it'd be very easy to feel like it's really jumbled. It'd be very easy to feel like there's no solid footing for what is the journey we're taking through this episode. But it does a neat job of making sure the scenes connect beat by beat. But although that said, the way I talk about the episodes, and I've noticed this between the last two episodes, is that I'm typically tackling just the flashback story than just the present day story, or vice versa. Because it's easier to talk about it that way. It's almost impossible to remember. There's a couple of them because there's really neat transitions, but it's impossible to remember the actual chain of, like, did that flashback scene take place before this scene in the present? It's really hard to kind of remember that, back and forth. So you typically have to tackle them as just, okay, here's all the flashback story and here's all the present day story, and connect the bits that need connecting. But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just easier to think of in those terms. But no, really strong episode. So I'm looking forward to episode 4. And I believe it's a look episode just from the description that came up on Netflix at the end of this one. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'll have that soon for you. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments. Like and subscribe. If you want to support the show, the channel, and everything we do here, head over to patreon.com/MaileFlizzTV, and you can do that. But otherwise, that's me. So thank you once again for watching. I will see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?